Hua Lei, and I'm going to be refuting the claim given by Hua, which is on minimum wage, and his claim was that minimum wage has a positive effect on small businesses. And his three secondary claims are raising the minimum wage will have a positive effect on employment, raising the wage will increase spending by consumers, and that raising the wage will also increase overall productivity. And I have several responses to those, and then the first response is that raising the minimum wage will actually end up reducing the employment rates. And then he stated for his support that people who are working harder jobs, and if they get a wage increase, it is likely that they will quit their jobs and try to find an easier job, since their overall income will be about the same. But then this will actually make it harder for people who are lower skilled to find a job, since they will be taken by those who have with a higher skill, and since those people will get hired more easily. And then Andrew Serios from Mises International stated that businesses are more likely to fire current workers than to hire new ones in order to cut back the cost of having to pay the increased wage difference. And one of the examples that he stated was that movie theaters have almost entirely stopped employing ushers, since they see it as it's not something that they need anymore, and then that the wage could be used for something else. And the second point, he stated that low wage people have, they tend to spend less because most of their wage goes to what they need, to buy what they need more, and then that they spend less on what they want and more on necessity. But then if the wages were to be increased, this will still end up affecting them and might end up affecting more people, because the increased wage means that businesses will have to find ways of balancing out the costs, and that one of the options for them is to increase their prices. And Howie Nielsen, who is a barbecue restaurant in New York, has been contemplating this, and then he said that one of the things that they would have to do is to charge more, since that is the easiest way, and that is a way that will affect them in like the more positive way. And the third point that was given was that small businesses demand more of their workers if the wage is increased, which will lead to increased productivity. But then this doesn't necessarily mean that just because the wage is increased that the workers will be more productive. It just means that raising the wage makes the workers more expensive. And Anthony Davis, a scholar at George Mason University, stated that historically, as minimum wage has increased, the unemployment has also increased, because businesses find or try to find workers who are more skilled, and that means that those of the lower class, which is a higher majority of the workers who are trying to find a job, have a less chance of being hired. And this actually overall makes it slightly less productive for businesses, since if a small business were to need to try to hire someone for just for extra help, it would be harder, since they would be less willing to have to pay out the extra, let's say if the wage was a raise to $10, they would have to pay an extra $10 per hour to someone who might not be needed the entire time. And so to conclude, Well, raising the minimum wage might be beneficial to certain people. It's actually more harm. It will actually has more negative effects on small businesses, since majority of their costs come from consumers and from the people they hire. And if the cost, or if the minimum wage is increased, then people will tend to spend less, and it will be harder for them to find the amount of money that they need to actually hire new people. Thank you.
All right, so the layout is okay at the beginning. When you get to the first point, you've got a counterclaim on employment. Your general information kind of explains what's going on here. I don't think that there's as much analysis of the advocate's evidence as there probably needs to be. Some of the inferences that the advocate was making seem to be a little bit of a stretch. You did have some good counter evidence here that shows that it's more likely that the firms are going to get rid of workers, and then you have an example that goes along with that to illustrate that particular point. That's okay. And then the second issue concerns how the money is, what the impact is going to be on the economy in these situations. And again, you have a counterclaim. There's not much analysis of the argument that the advocate presented and whether or not it's a reasonable inference for the advocate to make, but instead we kind of go to the counterclaim, which is that costs are going to increase. And I thought you'd had an okay example of costs increasing. I think that it's probably easier to make a broader generalization about that issue. And what's the consequence of the cost increasing? That affects everybody who's a consumer or is a customer of these employers, regardless of whether it's food prices or service prices that they're going to have to be paying for, and that's got a consequence. It's a burden that everybody affects. What impact that has on the economy, then I think you could contrast it a little bit to the argument that the advocate presented at the beginning. And then your third point that basically says it's going to reduce demand for certain kinds of workers. I thought you explained the concept there pretty well. I thought you had one good piece of evidence that kind of talks about that issue and why they would look for higher skilled workers that are going to get more productivity out of. That makes perfect sense. Your summary at the end was good. Like I said, I just think that the advocate's arguments need to be confronted a little bit more directly, but that you had good counterclaims on most of the issues. All right, thank you.